Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a new episode of the Somali Circle podcast. Today I'm joined by Mohamed Mohamud, the founder of the Somali Sideways. Brother, thank you for your time and thank you for coming over.
Thank you for inviting me, man.
It's a podcast long in waiting, mashallah. Alhamdulillah, we found a time to record this episode. Let's start from the beginning. Let's start off with a small introduction about yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Mohamed Mohamud. I run the platform called Somali Sideways, which is a visual storytelling project that is looking to amplify Somali voices and changing the narrative on how the world views Somalis around the world.
MashaAllah. And let's look from the start. That's always a good beginning.
The beginning, yeah.
Yeah, the beginning of the Somali Sideways. What sparked you to start the Somali Sideways?
So I started this idea 10 years ago. I was a 24-year-old and I wasn't happy with what I've been seeing online about us as Somalis. Through the media, if you were to go on Google and search Somalia or anything about the Somali region, the first 5-6 pages are negative. And that kind of made me feel a sense of like a little bit, like how is it that, this was allowed to happen? And obviously it's not even just non-Somalis. Somalis are perpetuating the narrative as well, the negative connotations about our people. So, I thought to myself, I have to do something about it. I don't know what it was. I wasn't happy with it. I needed to make this change somehow. I just didn't know how. And then I thought, let me interview Somalis and get the personalized human stories of Somalis in London. And then I interviewed a few friends of mine. I started thinking, okay, how do I make it into a visual sort of element to it? And then I started taking photos of Somalis standing sideways, hence the term Somali Sideways. And everyone has a side that friends and family can vouch for the type of person that they are. And that's the side that's visible to the person that's looking at the image. And the side that's hidden is only you know a certain aspect of your story that you keep within you that no one else knows. So the whole purpose of the project is to showcase the vulnerable, to showcase the struggle, the challenge that the Somali person that I'm interviewing is facing, so that us Somalis can, relate to it and feel inspired by it as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like that. It's like about a story of reclaiming the narrative.
Yes.
Like telling our own stories. And the first time I stumbled up on Instagram on the Somali Sideways, I was like very happy to read like the stories that resonates with me, because like I could see myself in a lot of those stories. What was the first time you obviously you organized a lot of events? How was the first event?
Yeah, so I organized my first event in 2018 near my area in Shepherd's Bush. And initially I didn't know how it would go about, because that was the year I published my first book, which is a photo book collection of stories that I gathered. And I didn't know how people would take it and whatnot, so I was very nervous. I didn't know how Somalis would take it. But it was interesting because...
Why were you nervous?
Oh,
what were you afraid of?
Oh, because it was the first event that I was headlining. A lot of the events in the past, I was always invited as a guest, so I was never the headliner. But in this case, it was literally about me. Also, I never really held an event with the bandwagon of Somali Sideways. It was always online. Even there was a time when no one really knew who ran the Somali Sideways project. I only showed my face in 2018 when I had to do a book. So obviously the picture came with the, being visible so that everyone knows. but no one really knew up until that time. And I started it in 2014. So 4 years, no one knew about it. I would go to events, people would be talking about it, and I'll be just listening. So I'll be like, what do you think of Somali Sideways? You know, someone would be like, oh, I didn't get it at first, but, you know, I think it's a really cool thing. And they didn't know that they were talking to me about it. And then, yeah, when I kind of made a big reveal, like, hey, guys, it's me, people were like, oh, so you're the one that's running it. So even till this day, people are either associating me with the project or they don't know my face, but when I mention Somali Sideways, they're like, yeah, I know that project. So it's either one of the two. And yeah, so I was nervous in the beginning, but then that nervousness shifted my thinking, because at the end of the day, if you are trying to create something, whether it's a project or a venture, business venture, whatever it is, you're always going to be nervous, and there's never a right time. You have to just launch it. If you feel like you have the tools and the equipment to share with the world, let it out. Because the moment that you think, this is the perfect time, you know, I'll do it next year. Next thing you know, 10 years is gone, and you're like, I wish I started 10 years ago. So yeah, my mindset was, I had to get rid of the nerves, and I have to just do it now and see where it goes. And alhamdulillah, you know, the project has evolved into so many things, and I'm grateful for that. The journey, the people that I met, the countries that I went to, yeah, I'm very grateful for sure.
MashaAllah. It's very inspiring to hear, like, we had multiple guests, and one thing that a lot of people say is just start. How do you overcome that? Because it's very difficult. It's very easy to say, but it's hard to do.
Yeah, of course. It's definitely hard. For me, I had this mentality of, you know, like every other human, like, how are people going to perceive what I'm going to share? Are people going to like it, you know, or not? But I think what people should shift towards is the work that you're doing. If it's authentic, people will like it anyway. And if people if you're showing people the work that you're doing, and they see the progression, people will support it regardless. So sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes, you know, whether it's you or your partner, or you're trying to build something, a company, or a social media account, or whatever it is that you're trying to share with the world, creative or anything like that, it is lonely in the beginning. And for a while, I was alone when I was doing this. You know, I didn't really, sometimes there were part of me, I just didn't want to do it anymore. I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah. There were moments when I was like, yeah, let me just wrap this up and do something else. But there was something that was inside me that told myself, do the best you can. And if it works out, then that's great. If it doesn't work out, it's still great. You know, either way, it's like you tried. And deep down, if you felt that you tried your best, no matter what, then, you know, that's when the faith comes in. You know, you believing that, you know, the work that you're doing, if it's for the people, and it's authentic, and you have the right intention, then you will never fail.
MashaAllah. Going back to your book, it's like a lot of hustle to publish a book. How did you do it?
Yeah, so I got in contact with a friend of mine that is based in Leicester. So he created the design of the book. I basically gave him the content. So he did the front and back cover. He basically did everything. I just gave him the info. Yeah. He designed it and whatnot, and then it was online. That's when the idea of having book events came about. That's when the idea of me visiting Somali communities around the world, doing events there, meeting Somalis, creating events for them, talking about my work. What I also try to do is I bring creatives in that specific city that I'm going to. So say, for example, there's an event in Nairobi that I'm organizing. I try my best to not make it just about me. So if there are creatives in that in that city, poets, filmmakers, photographers, or all things creative, I'll try and give them a platform as well. So if they want to showcase their work or perform or anything like that, I'll give them the space. Because at the end of the day, you know, doing something solely for you, it's not really something that Somali Sideways is about. It's about sharing stories, and it's about people. It's not about me. I like to view myself as a facilitator to this platform. I don't like to say that I own it or it belongs to me, or things like that. I like to think that it's your project as well. Like the Somali Sideways project is you. It's the stories that make it where it is now. So that's the essence of it. So bringing about different types of people, showcasing their work, that's what Somali Sideways is about. And that's what I try to focus on.
Looking at going abroad with this project, right? What was the reason? So you were doing UK, everybody was getting to know Somali Sideways. You did a book launch here in UK. When was the moment you thought like, hey, I need to go abroad and like share the message there too?
Yeah, so for me, my first trip outside of the UK with Somali Sideways was in, where was this? It was in the US. Yes, it was in the US. So that was my first time that I traveled internationally because of the bandwagon of Somali Sideways. So I was invited to Minnesota in America. And that was when I showed the idea to them. I was invited as a guest. So it was like a bandwagon of like international speaker, whatever you call it. And then when I held the event, there were people that approached me and was like, hey, this is like amazing. I've been following you for a while. So a lot of those kind of like messages I've been getting. And then I would go to different places in America. And then after that, I would come back to the UK, start planning, go to different places in Africa, Europe, and things like that. And then that's when I basically thought, okay, like this is a serious thing now. It's not just a hobby. I have to take it serious. So then that's when I started like thinking, okay, how can I branch this out? So that was when I started like promoting all kinds of stuff online, sharing all kinds of stories from people. And then I would make a call out and say, hey, if you have a story, I'll share it. And then I've been sharing it a lot as of late, like in the last like year or two. And then now like I get invited by different institutions to do this work like full time. I recently was in Cairo and Nairobi, gathering stories of Somalis there, different work. So those that are in foundations, those that are doing business, those that are in academia, those that have a story that was challenging, but they overcame that challenge. So stuff like that I was gathering. I just came back recently. So my plan now is to do a lot of these things, but in Africa. So go to Somali communities in Africa, and gather stories there, showcase the positive side of migration. Because when it comes to migration, Somalis are pretty much at the forefront. But in this day and age, people are using migration as a negative. Our migrants are on the boat, they're coming into our country, they're, drying up our resources, causing havoc in our country and things like that. So now we've been seeing a lot in the news that migration is a bad thing. But I'm trying to say that it's not. It's actually a positive if you look at it deeply. Human beings, we've always migrated. We were never like located in one place. We always moved around, no matter what. Sure. Whether you were like white, black, Asian, Far East Asian, Aboriginals, Native Americans, everyone moved. Like there was never a moment where everyone was located in one place and lived there and stayed there. The whole purpose of us as human beings is to move, is to migrate for a better life, for other opportunities. Like it's who we are as people. So that's what I'm trying to showcase with the Somali lens. So yeah, that's what I've been
in
trying.
Nairobi. So you went to Nairobi then to
Yeah.
show the story.
Yeah, so I went to Cairo first in
Mm.
Egypt, and then I gathered stories of Somalis there, interviewed them.
Could you give us an example?
Yeah, so for example, there's hopefully he'll be okay with me sharing it because I haven't shared it yet, but I'll just summarize it. His name is Ibrahim, and he's a filmmaker. And he is someone who released 3 films. One of them was nominated for an award 3 years ago. And
MashaAllah.
the Somali National Theatre has recently opened, and his films were the first that was publicly screened after 30 years in Hamar,
Wow.
Somalia, which is a massive thing, something to be proud of. And it's someone who is a Somali. So it's not like a non-Somali, tried to shape the narrative about Somalis, like, movies like Captain Phillips, for example, even though it's a story that is true, even though that the story, we have issues with regards to piracy and whatnot, but that's not just what we are about. There are so many other layers, so many different categories that we can showcase to the world in a positive way. So he had released these films, and as a Somali director, Somali actors, everything is produced by Somalis for Somalis.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he's one of the individuals that I interviewed, and I thought this would be something that would be amazing for aspiring filmmakers or creatives who'd be like, hey, you know what? Another Somali did this. Another Somali is creating this narrative that is bettering our people. So let's join and do our own thing in a separate way. Like many of us, there are so many Somali creatives that are doing the work, but we all have this collective achievement or progress that we're trying to work towards. Like we're all doing different things, but we're all channeling to the one thing, which is making us showcase ourselves in a positive way. So he's doing it in his angle, and there are many Somalis that are trying to do great stuff in not just in the Somali region, but globally.
Mm.
Wow. Yeah. And it's also important because if we actually take back the narrative, then a film about piracy becomes a film about fishermen taking back what's theirs, for example.
Yeah.
So you have been traveling to a lot of different Somali communities, right? What is the most interesting Somali community in Africa?
Whoa.
They are all interesting, of course.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
What stood you?
Well, definitely, I would say Nairobi. For sure, the Somalis there are doing well. Those that are local and from the diaspora. There are so many businesses that are there, successful ones. Like there's a restaurant called CJ's, and there are other Somali restaurants similar. There are also other businesses that are doing well, not just in Nairobi, but there's also a little. Well, I wouldn't say little, but Eastleigh, for example, which is in Nairobi, but on quite kind of far. But a lot of Somalis that are doing well there, doing all kinds of businesses, and it's round the clock as well. They open early, they close late, constantly all the time. And yeah, I would say Nairobi for sure in terms of business. And I would say in terms of stories that captured me, it would definitely be South Africa for sure. And I think for me with South Africa, I'm sure Somalis know about the xenophobia that's happening there, but the xenophobia is not just happening to Somalis only. It's happening to all Africans. And that's the narrative that, that before I got there, my family, friends of mine, when I told them I was going to South Africa, the narrative was, they're going to kill you, they're going to string you up. You know, have you not seen the videos of what they're doing with Somalis there? But when I went there, obviously I didn't come across any of that. I'm still here talking to you, but
Alhamdulillah.
alhamdulillah. But the stories that I've been gathering from outside of South Africa was that Somalis are they're being targeted, you know. But when I went there, I understood that yes, Somalis are targeted, but also other African communities in South Africa are being targeted with xenophobia. And it all stems from because, you know, the roots and the issues that are happening in that country are vast, that I don't even know where to start. And, you know, when it comes to the concept of thriving, Somalis in South Africa, a lot of them are doing well. And the South Africans, especially like the black South Africans, they have this notion that how is it that the Somalis are doing well in a short span of time? And then they have this sense of entitlement that we should have some of that. Or they have this idea of they're not paying taxes, they're not giving to the people when they are. So then this rhetoric has been spewing for a while. And then, of course, that hatred will build. So then it comes to a point where you start attacking them. You start attacking Somalis. You start, you know, thinking like, oh, how are they doing this well? Envious and all this stuff. So then that's where it stems from. Well, a small part of it, that's where it stems from. But the Somalis that I interviewed over there, you know, a lot of them have gone through so much in terms of like tahrib to come to South Africa. So when you hear the stories of what they went through and then how they built something so spectacular in a short span of time, it's very admirable. Like honestly, like as a not only as a Somali but generally speaking as a ethnic minority, like for someone who went through so much struggle to come from Somalia, who at the time we were going through a civil war, to go to a new country to start basically from scratch, and not only start something from scratch, but you are thriving better than the ones that are living in that country. That's something to be, as a Somali, I think that's something to be hugely like proud of.
Yeah, that proves the fact that Somali people can go anywhere and make something out of nothing.
Yeah.
So that's nice to hear. How is the? I know you have. I know you did an event in, I think in Somalia, Mogadishu.
Yeah, yeah.
How was that? What's different there?
That was my first time going back home.
Wow.
I've never been back home before that. So obviously, like I was going through crazy nerves because, you know, being in the West, living in the West, you hear so much about Somalia, you read the news and all kinds of stuff and whatnot, but it doesn't really fully register you. It makes you obviously you do your day-to-day stuff and you're like, oh yeah, that's back home. It's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that. And then you move on. But when you are going there, it's a different feeling. And I definitely felt, in the beginning, I felt scared for sure. I felt, I don't know what to expect, how the Somalis will react to me, and things like that. But then I come to realize very quickly that Somalia is like any other place. It's the people are connected online. They know who you are. They know the work you do. You know, they bring you close. They take you places. And if anything, I would say the Somalis that are back home are more welcoming than anywhere else. You know, with the little that they have, they want to bring you to their house. They take you out, coffee or food or whatever. And yeah, they make sure that you have a good time.
Amazing. How are the creatives there?
The creatives I met so many photographers, mostly photographers, and a lot of them I've been following online. So to see them is, yeah, it's amazing for one thing, but I find it very like amazing, admirable, because they're showcasing the side of Somalia that we don't see. They're showcasing the beauty of our country in a different way through lens. And yeah, some of them started off as a hobby, and then, you know, their work became recognized. They're doing exhibitions now. Different organizations are like, yeah, we want to exhibit your work, not only in Somalia, but outside as well. And then we have content creators as well. There's a massive Somali community of content creators all over Somalia and the Somali region, showcasing different areas that people don't know about, the different landscapes, the different areas and beaches that people don't know about. And yeah, there's I'm sure you all know of Saeed from social media, who's from here in the UK, but he is now in Somalia, and he just vlogs and showcases the beauty of Somalia. And there are many people like him as well. So there are so many, and it's growing. And I feel like because of the power of social media, it's now been shifted, but there is still a bit of a struggle through mainstream media, putting out articles that are problematic. Like, for example, there was an article, I don't want to mention her name, but there was an article that was talking about a Somali pageant, like beauty pageant. So yeah, women that were contesting for an award. And the title was problematic. It said, Somali beauty pageant won in a country that has no rights for women.
That's a crazy perception.
Which is basically saying Somali women have no rights in the country, which is absolutely not true. So the social media aspect is reaching at a certain point, but now we need to go through media outlets that, massive media outlets that are able to change the narrative bigger. Because social media is you look at something, it's a trend, and it will fade away. So you have to constantly share content in order for you to amplify your message. Because if you share something once and you share something else 6 months later, people are just going to forget, because that's what social media is. So the target has to be mainstream media, the news that people look at on their TV, the stories that they gather. We have to, they have to be held accountable for what they're doing. I feel as though, social media is great. Somalis are sharing it, a lot of things, massive things. Like Jabril, you mentioned about the Somali, I think footballer or something like that, that I saw on your content, which is great. So stuff like that, it can only reach a certain level. So the next target is mainstream media.
And how can we get into that?
It's a good question. There are a lot of journalists now from the African continent and Somali journalists that are trying to do, and they're trying to showcase the positive side of Africa and Somalia. So there are different types of narrative now. Storytelling is a massive thing. News outlets are now, or even just companies and organizations, are now using storytelling as a tool to spread the message that they're trying to portray. So now people are understanding, in order for you to captivate an audience, in order for you to get people's attention, is by sharing stories. And people are now understanding that.
How can we tell a story?
I think what we need to focus on is trying to bring about the issues that a certain sort of people are facing. So say, for example, if it's about the environment and climate change or things like that, the best way to captivate it is by the people that are struggling because of climate change, and to ask them, what is it that you're struggling with? Like, how can we solve this? And things like that, to make the issue at first hand. And that would drive the message, because you are interviewing people who are going through this struggle because of a particular issue. For example, if it's climate change, that would be able to spread your message further, because you're directly getting the people that are affected by it. So so in terms of you just have to look at what you want to focus on, the issue at hand, what you want to address, and then you work your way there.
And that ties back into the beginning of the question. The first question I had was, how can we get into the mainstream? And that was by your point of, okay, you need storytelling. That should be the premise. There's a lot of companies now and media outlets are trying to use storytelling as a medium. Well, if you look at the past year, I think in the past year that mainstream media lost a lot of credibility.
Yes.
So there's a lot of new ways of gaining information. You get real-time live information on your feed, and that works better. I've seen that that's something that's getting more attention, and mainstream is losing control of the narrative, it seems like. How can the next generation take back hold of the narrative that we are shaping up, and how can we shape it to our benefits in this sense?
I think the younger generation now have been using social media, creating certain like videos to address a particular issue. Because now, but back in the days, people would be like, watching a segment of 10, 15 minutes of whatever it is that the issue is. Now, the content has now shifted from 20 minutes, 15 minutes to a minute, maybe even less, to summarize a whole issue, which has its pros and cons. Obviously, the pro is like you understand what the problem is, you know what needs to be done, and you want your government to address it. But then, of course, there are certain like information that's missing because there's only so much you can say in a minute. There might be some vital information that you're missing. And I think that's what people are nowadays, like the issue of Palestine, for example, it's all because of social media. Younger generation, Gen Zs, maybe some millennials, I'm not sure, but they have been driving the issue of what's happening in Palestine, and how certain things have been going on in their countries, which enabled to where it is now. I don't think we would have had an awareness this big. I don't think I've ever seen an awareness of Palestine ever. Like this is something that is going to change the world, like on a massive scale, because people are now understanding that, like, the issue of what's happening there is it's much more than what we've been told, and it's because of what people have been sharing online that has enabled people's thinking of, okay, this is not like a Palestine thing or an Israeli thing, this is a human thing. Like, how are human beings going through this? Like, how is it that women and children are the ones that are being killed the most? So now it's not, like I'm Palestinian and Israeli. People are now seeing, no, this is like a human thing. How are human beings going through this? And it's the Palestinians that have been killed the most out of the two sides. And it's fact. Like, people have been trying to spin the different connotations to what's happening, but it's fact. Like, more Palestinians are being killed since October 6th. So yeah, I feel as though social media is like, it goes on one way, but at the same time, I feel as though being involved in media doesn't necessarily mean that you showcase, with a headline, I work for Al Jazeera, for example, the news that you're saying is credible or something like that. A lot of people that are doing social media, they elevated from being on social media to mainstream. People from mainstream media are looking for people that are active on social media to showcase the message that they're trying to do. There are so many journalists that are content creators, and then you see them on AJ Plus, or you see them in working for other media outlets. So people are now shifting and using people that are in social media to become mainstream. So nowadays it's not like, I have to be on a mainstream channel to share my message. It's not necessarily the case now. You can just have an account, just share your message, and if it reaches viability, mainstream media will approach you and be like, hey, we want to give you a segment, we want you to basically do this full time. So now we're shifting into that road.
Yeah.
And I feel like mainstream media is looking for good stories.
Yeah.
Most people think like it's very hard to get on mainstream media, but it actually isn't if you have a good idea or want to talk about something relevant for them at that time and have like a unique perspective of view on it. So almost like channels or newspapers, the name of the journalist is there, and you can email them. You can find their email and just send them the story to a bunch of different journalists, and they might like give you a space if you have an actual good story. So it's also for people to know like it's not as hard or as difficult to become like to get onto the mainstream train, because social media drives culture now. So if you're doing good things there, mainstream wants that because they need the attention too.
They need it, yeah.
Going back to the business side of things, because it is the Somali circle, the entrepreneurial journey, I want to get into two things. One is the becoming, doing the business side of things good as a creative, right? You know this notion of the starving creative, that kind of stuff. And the other one is like a little masterclass of like how to craft your story as a business owner, because one of the best way to sell things is through story, through voicing. So let's start with the first one. How do you make sure that you can live full time of Somali Sideways?
Right. I think for me, especially in the beginning, there were a lot of moments where I didn't make anything. And I think as a creative, you have to accept that. And I think it's not even just being a creative. I think business as a whole, the early stages is always the most difficult. You know, the part where you spend a lot on from your side as a personal cost, and hoping that it would either break even or there will be a surplus in the future. So you have to accept that in the beginning it will be tough. And once you accept that and you don't see it as a burden, then you start being able to craft what you were meant to do. And you start focusing on, okay, I need to do this. I need to, for example, in my case, showcase the stories online, you know, get an attraction online, showcase particular stories that people can resonate with. And then, just keep going and being consistent. Being consistent is important as well, because there was a moment where Somali Sideways was a bit quiet at some point, and I felt as though I needed to change my approach to how I'm going to elevate the brand, essentially. And I think you know, you have to, when you're building something, you have to take some time out and look at how I'm going to approach it in the future. Where do I see this heading? Because in the beginning, this was just a hobby. I just was taking photos and gathering stories. I didn't think it would take me to where I am now. You know, going to countries, you know, on behalf of institutions to craft something. I never thought this would lead to that. And I think it depends on the trajectory. So, you know, for me, I've been doing this for 10 years now. And, you know, I would say the first 4, I wasn't making anything with this idea. And it wasn't something that I was only doing this. I had a 9-to-5 as well. So I was doing my 9-to-5 and then was able to shift this not to full time, but focus more deeply on where this can go. So now at the moment I'm freelancing. I've shifted from 9-to-5 to freelancing. So when projects come to me, you know, I start writing articles or sharing work online, collaborating with different news outlets, online magazines and things like that, whilst at the same time doing Somali Sideways. So that's where I'm at now. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I shifted Somali Sideways to full-time, although that's what I intend to do. I feel as though this period of 10 years has been a learning curve for me, a massive one, because when I started this, I was in my mid-20s, and now I'm not. I'm getting older. So now I have to shift this to, okay, how can I elevate this into making some sort of like revenue that, you know, essentially moving this to a side hustle. Because before it was more of impact, it was more of community, it was more of bringing people together. So now I want to shift it towards, okay, like making this into a side hustle.
Yeah. And how are you trying to do that?
Yeah.
Are there any plans for?
Yeah, I do. I have plans. I have some ideas that I want to do, that I want to focus on that. But I have this thing where I don't really.
Don't tell, show.
Yeah. Until I show, basically. Yeah. So when people will see it, then they will know, okay, this is what he was talking about.
Inshallah.
Yeah. Inshallah, of course. Yeah. It's all by the will of Allah at the end of the day. This wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Islam, believing in Allah at the end of the day. So, yeah.
And going back to the second part of my question about storytelling, are there any principles of storytelling that you use to make sure that you tell captivating, captivating stories?
It's all right.
Yeah.
Oh, the stories. Yeah. So, because at the end of the day, in order for you to get a captivating story, is when the person is looking at it, it doesn't resonate with them. And if it doesn't, then you lost. Because if the person that is looking at the story or reading the story, if they don't feel that it's connecting them, then you basically just like, it didn't work. So you have to think about, okay, if I'm sharing something, how can it resonate with a particular group of people, in this case Somalis? So I looked into the themes that we're related, like what are we like relatable with, in terms of struggle, in terms of themes like civil war, migration, for example, which is a big one, and of course being nomadic, migration, same thing, education, business, entrepreneurship, family dynamics, motherhood, and stuff like that. So a lot of these themes, it's relatable to a lot of Somalis, most Somalis. So if I were to create a story that is about those themes, majority of the time people will resonate with it. People will connect with it. People will be like, oh, it's as if they're talking to me. So if you're creating a story that is like that, then the story will reach like an audience, not even just those connecting to it, but also perhaps non-Somalis that may even feel a connection to this too. So it's not even just a Somali thing. Obviously we all go through stuff like migration, the struggle, going through tahrib and things like that. Somalis are not the only ones going through it. Yeah. It's other groups that are going through the same thing. So you might be resonating with that to someone else. So that's what I try to focus on with my stories, to make it more relatable, even if it's a sense of inspiration as well. If it's about a story that a female runs a business and becomes successful, or someone that's in the fashion industry and things like that, a lot of Somali women will relate to it. A lot of Somali women will maybe feel a sense of inspiration, use them as a benchmark and be like, I want to be like this person. Yeah. So things like that.
Very interesting. So to unpack for people so they can apply it into their business, you gave a lot of value there. So I want to make sure that they understand.
Okay.
So the thing is, let's for example say you want to start a Ma'wis business. Yeah. And you're talking about, okay, there has to be teams that relate to the audience, right? So most people want to only talk about the Ma'wis. Hey, I have Ma'wis, please buy my Ma'wis.
Just the new color.
Yeah, look at this color, or look at this, like, where it's made from, fabrics and stuff like that. Nobody cares about that.
No.
At all. But if you tell the story about, like, how your uncle was wearing it, or, like, the different teams within, like, what does a Ma'wis mean?
The history
to
of
be a
it.
Somali, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the teams you are talking about. So what are the teams? So you have product and you have the story above it, and if you tell the story very good, they will buy the product,
of course,
at some point. So I want them to understand, like, hey, you need different themes you can talk about. The one could be culture, the other one could be like how your father helped you make the first ma'wist with the hand and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I hope people like get that out of your story, that you like need different themes you can talk about within the product space. It's not about the product, it's the why behind what they do.
Exactly, yeah. Why it was made, what was the reason it was made, the people that wore it, when it was worn, all this stuff. It's like a timeline. Because at the end of the day, when your story is about a bit like, you know, a timeline at the end of the day. So if you were to go through this timeline, people will be tuned into it. People will be like, oh, so this is how it went from this to this to this. And then in the end, it will be either, like in this case, you wearing the product. Yeah. And you'd be like, this is how it was made. Yeah. So that will captivate the person and be like, hey, I want to see what this is about. Yeah. And now, like, I've been seeing, even with the Ma'wist thing, I've been seeing a lot of non-Somalis wearing it as well. Like non-Somali, like people wearing and be like, what, you guys have been gatekeeping this thing. Exactly. Why haven't you been telling us about it? So I feel like now they're joining the Ma'wist gang. They're like, I'm wearing it when I go to sleep now, and I'm like, wow, that's like, it's. I think now being a Somali, it's like it's a flex now. Before, I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up, I never really mentioned it. I was, you know, I always used to class myself as just black, you know, but now it's like, you know, people are eating the food, Somali food. People are wearing our clothes. People are going to weddings now. Non-Somalis are going to weddings, dancing. There was a Somali event that I went to in Oslo. There was a choir that were Adan, and they were singing a Somali song.
I saw that on TikTok.
I don't know if you've seen it.
I've seen it.
So in my head, I'm like, wait, hold on a second. So I saw these people on TikTok, but I didn't know it was from Norway. I didn't know they were from Norway. I just thought it was just a bunch of Adans random. Yeah. So I'm just going to this event, and you know, I was going there with an intention of speaking about Somali Sideways, giving a presentation about Somali identity, the evolution of Somali identity, media perceptions, and all that stuff. And then after I finished speaking, towards the end, people were like, oh, there's going to be a choir that's coming. I'm like, okay, a choir. And I'm like, Somali choir? Somalis are doing, choir? Okay. Yeah. In my head, I was like, no, okay, interesting. And then I just saw a bunch of Adan people coming, like a bunch of like 18-year-olds. I don't know, actually. I don't know. They might not be 18. But like they look young, like maybe university students. Yeah. They all come and I'm like, okay. And I thought that they were like introducing the Somali choir. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, we're the choir. And I was like, what? And they were speaking Norwegian. So the guy next to me, I'm like, wait, are they the ones singing? He's like, yeah. I said, nah, bro. They're like, nah, these are the ones that are singing in Somali. And I'm like, nah, you're joking. He goes, yeah, watch. So I'm watching. And I'm like, you know what? Let me just get my phone out. So I got my phone out, I'm recording. And yeah, they're just singing in Somali. They're actually singing in Somali. Like all in tune and all this stuff. And all the audience were just clapping. Yeah. And I was like,
I'll be flabbergasted.
I couldn't speak for a bit, like maybe a good few minutes. I'm like, no, this is mad. Like, how is this happening? This is what's going on? So yeah, going back to what I was saying, now you're seeing people like non-Somalis that are in love with our culture now more than ever.
There's everything to love about our culture.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's like, it was, the funny thing is, it's like boring now to say that you're Adan. Right?
Yeah.
So from when I was little, it was like a flex, like this blonde people, the flexing, like whatever. And then now it's like the most boring thing ever. So
yeah. That's why you see a lot of them, like, you know, they go to Africa, they're like, I don't want to leave. Yeah. And you're like, what? Like, I want to stay here. Like people that I meet in Norway, not Norway, in Nairobi, for example, Somalia, other places in Africa, they're like, I want to stay. I don't want to go back.
I think it's also because we live in the loneliest generation for the Adan people, especially in the Netherlands. Okay. So it's like the most lonely. Like 1 out of 5 people are lonely, right?
Wow.
So
That's
Yeah?
a lot.
You hear crazy stories that
Yeah.
people be
So
doing.
imagine coming to a country like Nairobi, where everyone like cares about you, right? The
Yeah.
community is
There's
like
community,
warm. People are inviting over to your to their houses,
Yeah.
giving you food,
Yeah.
and there's no strings attached. There's nothing.
Yeah.
They just give you because they are just kind, warm people, right? But you went there, and even your parents didn't do that for you back home as a Western person, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, why would I leave this, right? I feel at home. I feel more at home here than there.
Then we're over there.
Yeah, and that's like the power of the community, of the Somali community, but also the African community in general.
Yeah. Community is very important. Community is very important because at the end of the day, you are a product of your environment. So if your environment is negative, no one talks to each other, neighbors aren't even saying hello, and things like that, you're going to be a product of that. You have no choice because this is what you see every day. So yeah, and if you go to an area where it's vibrant, people are welcoming, you're gonna have that energy too, regardless. You without you even realizing, you're just gonna have it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you are a product of your environment at the end of the day.
So if you look at the, I know you don't want to give too much away, but looking at the
Next
years ahead, what is the plan for Somali Sideways?
For me, Somali Sideways, I want to move it towards like making it like a media mainstream, like, you know, writing about all things Somali, maybe creating some sort of hub where people can just write stuff, and I'll be releasing it online and things like that, or perhaps collaborating with other news outlets, you know, showcasing Somalia like for a section. So all things about Somalia, what's happening there, all the positive stuff, creatives and all these things. So yeah, that's my vision now. And I'm actually doing it now, but I want to do it much more. Because I feel like collaboration, it's a secret weapon that a lot of people aren't using. Because once you start collaborating with people who align with similar vision as you, your message elevates naturally, you know. And I've realized, like, I've been collaborating with a lot of people recently, of course collaborating with you guys, collaborating with others as well, and I noticed a shift, like, in my brand, my work, like, you know, that if I were to have done it myself, it wouldn't have reached where it's gone at the present moment. So collaborating with different people, you know, it's great, and I think it's what all of us should do, especially because a lot of people are doing similar things, and I think if we were to collaborate and work together, the message will just branch out, you know. So I think I'm going to be doing more of that than I have done in the past. Yeah. Inshallah.
Mashallah, brother. And I'm looking at the time, it's already 55 minutes just passed by that.
Wow, I didn't realize it was like, not even hungry anymore.
We're going to eat afterwards, inshallah.
No.
Brother, to end the podcast, we do this with all our guests.
Okay.
One question. What is the one thing you would like to share with the viewers and listeners of this podcast?
One thing.
One message you want to share with the viewers and listeners. Everyone takes the time. Takes the time.
Okay. Wow. One message. I mean, the one thing that I've always been, like, this saying has always been in my head for a long time, and I think those who are following me might not know this, but there's a saying that goes, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." A lot of the time we've been seeing people always talking about what they believe in, but as Muslims we need to start embodying what we believe. We need to start, you know, bringing this sense of, okay, I have to showcase it so people can see, so people can look at my character, my personality, and all these things. So if you always say I believe this, I believe that, that's one thing. But if you were to embody it, it's a whole new level. So yeah, that's what I would say my message is: embody what it is that you believe in, and you realize that the world will favor you.
MashaAllah.
So
Beautiful.
don't say be, just be.
Exactly, just be. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Very beautiful.
Okay, we are going to introduce a second one because I like the
Continue.
last podcast,
Uh-huh.
which is like, what's your favorite mahma? You can choose one.
Whoa. I mean, I don't want to say the obvious ones like أقول الآن وإفتي الآن. That's the obvious one.
But it's true though.
It is true, yeah, of course.
Like it's sometimes the obvious and the simple ones are the best.
Oh, the best, yeah.
But like, we're not going for that now.
No,
so-
okay, true.
Yeah,
because,
yeah, exactly.
I'll
Come
get
on.
Yeah, no, it's true, of course.
But which one resonates with you most?
Dumurka wa sheh, nimuka wa sheko. I'm joking. I'm joking. No.
Okay, cut.
Yeah, sorry. No. That's I mean that's a whole new mahma. But I would say I don't know the Somali term for it. I just know like you like something along the lines of you are not like a man if you don't economize what it is that you're doing or something along those lines. If you're doing something and your intention is not to elevate it or things like that, then what you're doing is pointless. There's a Somali saying for it, I just don't know, but it's something along those lines.
Stop doing something if you don't want to excel.
Exactly. Something along those lines, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what
I would love to say it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I do not want to say it.
We'll just put it on the screen.
Someone in the
Okay.
comments will say that. Will
Or
write
what it
out.
is, yeah, that's true. Someone will say it,
Someone
yeah.
will say out.
Yeah.
So
Brother, how can they find you?
Oh,
How can they join the movement? What
yeah,
do
so
you
if
then want to do after they get inspired by this amazing podcast?
yeah, of course, definitely. You can people can like follow Somali Sideways. I'm doing a call out, so if you want to share your story, feel free to. Let's collaborate. If you have a platform yourself, and you want to collaborate with me, I'm more than happy to. So all things about positive, my sharing stories, I'm all for it. So if you have something along those lines, I'm here to listen.
Yeah. And do you know when the next event is? Can they already buy tickets for an event of yours? Or
I haven't come up with an event yet.
yeah, just follow and you will see.
Just follow, I would say, stay tuned.
Brother, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming, and we'll see each other very soon, inshallah.
Definitely, man. Thank you guys for having me. I love your podcast. For those of you who don't follow the podcast, follow them. It's called The Somali Circle on Instagram and TikTok. So yeah, anyone that is having those platforms, make sure you follow them because they're going to be interviewing some heavy hitters for sure.
100%. And you're one of them.
Oh,
Yeah, we just
Definitely
did.
one of
We
mine.
just did.
thank you.
Thanks, brother.
Hi, wallah.
No
Shukran.
worries, man.